So to start off, we'll go through a PowerPoint presentation of inventory processes in the system. We'll do a couple of transactions so you see how it looks. And then from there, we'll go through the bin management. So in this, we'll go over how to create a warehouse, which is very quick, view warehouses and bin location structure, and describe the dropship process at a high level. In this example, we make and buy stuff. We have one warehouse is controlled by bins, another warehouse is physically located at a vendor location, and we're going to grow into a new region. So we need to create a new warehouse. So first, if we look at the warehouse and documents in the system, you can see by default when you set up the system, your first warehouse is called Warehouse 01 General Warehouse. You can change the name to whatever you like. That's just a system default. The key is different transactions will post to the warehouse for inventory managed items. If your item master record is set up to an inventory item in the upper right-hand list of checkboxes, then any movement in and out of your company will record the inventory value and quantities going in and out of stock in the warehouses associated. In the sales process and the purchase process, this is going to hit the system. In inventory adjustments, that's also going to hit the inventory values and quantities. So this is an example of a warehouse set up at a company that we're going to use for this demo purposes. I've got 4 warehouses, warehouse 1, 2, 3, and 5. You can see warehouse 3 is defined as a dropship warehouse. I got 2 standard warehouses, my general and my regional, and then I have one called a bin managed warehouse, so we can show you how bins are set up and managed in the system. So when you define a warehouse, you go to the warehouse, you set up new, it will ask you what type of warehouse it's going to be on the general tab. Is it drop ship? Is it nettable? And should I enable bin locations? If I enable bin locations, then you can define your bin sublevels. So it starts off, I have the warehouse level is warehouse 05. Underneath that, I could have different rows or aisles in this case, aisle A1 through A4. Underneath each aisle, I can have shelves, S1, S2, S3, S4. You can have as many shelves as you want. And within each shelf, you can have specific levels of the shelves. So here, if I said my full bin location is warehouse 05, A1, S1, and L3, and you can see when I choose the bin location in the selection field on a transaction, I could put in that code, which is warehouse level 1, 2, and 3, and it would put that quantity, either move it to or from that location based on my selection. Something to note, if you do not assign a bin location on a bin managed warehouse, the system will create a default system bin location to put stuff in until you correct it. So if you can't find stuff, chances are it's in the system bin location because someone did not assign it to an actual physical bin when they were doing the transaction. So the transactions that are actually going to hit warehousing and bin locations in general, on the purchasing side when you receive it, or when you invoice it if you don't process the receipt. If you were familiar with our earlier training, when I do an AP invoice, if I've done a goods receipt, then basically it moves the value to the accounts payable account. But if I've skipped the goods receipt, it has to receive the materials and put the value in the accounts payable. So if I want to skip a step and do a streamlined process, you can do that, and the AP invoice will effectively do the inventory portion automatically. Same thing on the sales process. I do a delivery note when I ship it, and I do the AR invoice when I send that to the customer. And this is your inventory, and this moves it to the accounts receivable value. If I skip the delivery and go straight to invoice, it does both transactions, both inventory and accounts receivable in one transaction. And finally, when I go to a production process, I can create a production order, I can release the production order to be worked on, and then the inventory hits are when I issue materials to the production order or I receive the products from the production order. That moves it in and out of my inventory. If I've set up a drop ship warehouse, the concept here is I would take an order for a product, but I would never take physical ownership of that product. So at the row level of my sales order, I could choose to fulfill the order from my dropship warehouse. So in this case, it would be warehouse 03, and that will automatically kick off the purchasing process for me to purchase it from a vendor and have it delivered directly from the vendor to the end customer, thus a dropship, and I never bring it into my own physical warehouse location at any time. Okay, so let's take a quick look at it in the system so we know what we're looking at. You can see here, if I go under administration, setup, inventory, I have warehouses. And there is your warehouse screen, all the information you need. And as I flip through these, there is my 01 general warehouse. I have it set up as nettable, which means that the inventory values and quantities will be taken into account when I do all my planning, etc. You can see I have my locations. I have a default tax code. So if I purchase something to go into this warehouse, it will automatically pick up the tax code and I don't have to fill it in manually. But I do not have it bin enabled because I didn't want to manage this warehouse as a bin location. There's my West Coast warehouse, same basic setup, different address obviously, but it allows me to have warehouses on both sides of the country. There's my 03 dropship warehouse. You can see here I have checked the box to dropship. Now, if I wanted to get very detailed on it, I could actually manage serial numbers and batches, at which point during the purchase process to purchase from the vendor and have it shipped directly to the end customer, I could pre-select what specific serial numbers or batches they have to ship to the end customer. It's very difficult to manage that, obviously, since the inventory never touches my warehouse, so I really don't know what they're shipping until they send me their shipping documentation. But if you do have, for example, a vendor managed inventory engagement to where you can keep track of what inventory and batches and serial numbers that they have, and you tell them specifically which ones to move, you can automate that process as well. And then finally, you see here, I got my consignment warehouse, and I believe there's my bin management. And you can see when I turn on bin management, I get the bin tab. Now what this allows me to do is define the bin locations that I want to have. So I could define the aisle, you can see here my bin location 05, aisle 4, shelf 4, level 1. So it's telling me that that is the structure that I have for my bin locations. And I can even look at, by clicking this orange arrow, these specific bin locations that I have in the system. And at any time, I can see what quantities of items I have in the bins, and I can see the number of items. So I only have one item code and I have 318. And if I want to see the details, I can drill on it and I can see the specific item that I have in here. So you have a lot of pre-built-in reporting for bin management, and you see here is that system bin that I explained earlier, that if I did not assign a bin location to something moving into my bin managed warehouse, it would automatically put it in the system bin location as a default until I figure out where I want to move it to. At which point I could do an inventory transfer to move stuff from one location, bin location, to another. And we're going to just do a couple of quick transactions. If I go into, let's say, inventory, and I'm going to receive some materials into a bin location. So I'm going to do an inventory goods receipt. I'm going to choose an item to receive. I need some of those. We'll receive in 100 of those, and I'm going to choose my bin location warehouse. And you can see here it's now showing that I do not have a bin allocated. I could choose my bin to allocate by choosing the bin location. And you can see I could choose my system bin or a different bin location. It's really up to me, but I'm just going to put it in the system bin to make my life simple. I hit update, I click OK, and you can see now it's going to put all 100 in my system bin. And I hit the add button. And just like magic, there it is. And if I click on the orange arrow, I can now see that I have put 100 units into a bin location. The same concept works on pretty much every transaction that you're using in the system when you start using bins. So again, if I do a sales order, I do a delivery to a customer, doesn't really matter who, I'll choose that same item, and I'm going to issue 25, and I'm going to do it from, let's see if I have my warehouse visible. I don't seem to have it visible, so I'm going to make it visible. Clicking here, going to my table format, and let's find the warehouse I'm issuing from. There it is. Click OK, and you can see here it's trying to issue it from the default warehouse. I'm going to choose the bin, and it's going to say where you're taking it from, and you can see I have it in the system bin, so it's going to default to that location. It's going to say if you take the 25 out that's being allocated, it will leave 75 available. Now, if I had it in multiple locations, I could actually select it, a couple here, a couple there, from different bins, as long as it's the same warehouse. I hit the enter button, the transaction happens, and it has now taken that out of stock. And if you look at the accounting, as I mentioned, when you do a delivery, that's your inventory portion of the sales. It hit my inventory account and it hit my cost of goods sold, but it has not hit my accounts receivable account. I have to take this and copy it to an AR invoice for it to now do the final process in the accounting, at which point, if you go and look at, looks like I got it out of sequence. I'll do it this way. This is one of the great things, and I got relationship maps, so I can actually see the AR invoice. There it is. And from here, if I look at the account posting, you see it's hit my MaxiTech, my sales tax, and my revenues account automatically. So cost of goods sold and inventory was adjusted in the delivery, and the journal entry for the AR invoice does the AR portion of the transaction. But if instead I decide I'm going to skip that and just do an AR invoice, I'll choose the same customer, and I'll choose the same item. But this time I'll do it for 10. And just like before, I do not have my warehouse showing, so I'm going to show the warehouse so I can select a different one. And you see it's going to auto allocate from the only place it has it, and it says you got 75, you're allocating 10, so you only got 65 available now. And I go ahead and process it. And now the interesting thing, and just to prove that I did it right, let me see if I can find it this way. There it is. But if I go to the accounting on this transaction, since I did not do the delivery note, you can see I've now hit my cost of goods sold, my inventory, MaxiTech, my tax, and my revenue account all in one transaction. So if you do skip one of the earlier processes that's hitting inventory in either your sales or your purchasing, the invoice will automatically clear it up to make sure that everything stays in sync. which is a nice safety feature to have in your ERP system because many systems do not do that automatically. The key things to keep in mind when you're doing bin management in SAP is that you have to define the warehouse. Then once you define the warehouse information, you would check the box to make it bin managed. And once you've defined the bin managed warehouse, then you can define your different bins and the associated attributes. And again, I have multiple step-by-step guides to walk you through this. If you run into any issues, we always recommend test this out in a test database first, because it's not something that's easy to undo once you put it in place. That being said, as long as you haven't transactions going into the warehouse at any time, you could delete the warehouse and start over, so it's not a deal killer. And you can always make a warehouse inactive so no one can transact in it if you have accidentally done transactions in it and you realize something is completely wrong. So it gives you more control, it gives you more complexity, it gives you a lot more flexibility around inventory management and counting, and really it really pushes more and more towards the use of scanning solutions tied into your warehousing.